Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Welcome to Mesa County Compass.
Thank you very much.
We have today as a guest speaker, if you will, Bill Waite. He is Chairman Emeritus of Homeward Bound. And welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
We will begin this by asking you a little bit about yourself. If you could give us a little bit about yourself and what you do in your position, please.
Well, I'm a Colorado native. Was born in Cripple Creek. Grew up here in Grand Junction. Graduated from high school in 1965 from Grand Junction High School. Went off to a 30-plus year career on Wall Street and retired back here in 2012. And as part of my retirement, I had done public service things when I was on Wall Street. I got involved with Homeward Bound in 2012 and have been involved with them ever since. Served as chairman for 6 years, and then they finally kicked me upstairs to chairman emeritus in 2022. And when the city put this project together for the resource center, they asked me to take on part of that project as a board member.
Nice. Well, you told me you've had a heart for the homeless for a long time, and you told me about a project that kind of got you involved in that in the first place, and it was, I think you said, back in Chicago.
No, it was in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
It was
pick a place.
Yeah, pick a place. Well, Chicago's pretty much the same. It was a street ministry called Feed My Sheep that was run by a recovered alcoholic who saw people sleeping under bridges and viaducts. And while we do have a homeless problem in this valley, and we know it, it is still, as I am often frequently quoted, it is still a problem we can do something about. A city the size of Pittsburgh, a city the size of Chicago, a city the size of even Denver, the numbers have just gotten so large that it's impossible for them to really do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And so I was invited to be a part of Feed My Sheep, largely because my wife wanted me out of the house.
Oh, good.
And so we would prepare meals for 100 people and then take them to downtown Pittsburgh and serve them on the street in a little pocket park. And I was amazed at where people came from. And, you know, I have served meals on that street in snow up to my hips when you were in the middle of a blizzard and people were still coming out to eat. So it's a problem that affects the entire country. And I was just reading today in the Denver Post, the mayor in Denver is about to hit his goal of housing 1,000 people before the end of the year inside hotels. The difficulty with that and the criticism he's receiving, he's doing a marvelous job with a terribly large problem, but the criticism he's receiving is, well, yeah, you put them in these hotels, but you don't have enough people to give them service and support. And what happens when one of them gets kicked out of the hotel for breaking the rules? They go back to the street. And that's the problem we're all dealing with. We're fortunate in the Grand Valley, and we do have a homeless problem, there's certainly no question. But we are fortunate in that it is a problem we can get our hands around if we take the right steps. And theoretically, and I'm a firm believer, that the development of this resource center is the first step in that process. The services that the resource center will offer are services that are being offered presently by other nonprofits in disparate locations, from Catholic Outreach to the Joseph Center to Amos Counseling to Homeward Bound. The real difference people need to remember when they think about the resource center is that it's a capacity issue. We have approximately 60 to 200, depending on which day of the week it is and time of the year, people who are congregating in the parks. And they wanted to congregate in the parks to be there with their friends. They also wanted to congregate in the parks because that's where they knew they would get fed and get handouts. And the issue that we're trying to solve with the resource center on a temporary basis, and we can talk about that a little bit more, is that we want to be able to get the vast majority of those people into a single location where they can access services from multiple providers at a single location, and attempt to move some percentage of them, off the streets into permanent housing. It is not a solution by any means. It is the first step in a solution. Our biggest missing piece in this valley is transitional housing. Mm-hmm. But that requires a longer time frame to do and a longer process. But hopefully, by establishing the Resource Center as a partnership between Homeward Bound, United Way of Mesa County, and the city and the other nonprofits, we can keep the city pushing along a track to resolve this problem with some transitional housing within the next couple of years.
Okay. What is transitional housing?
Well, transitional housing is generally, and there are, like most things governmental, there are multiple definitions, but transitional housing generally means that it's a safe place to live with individual units for a family or for an individual that has a small kitchenette, a bathroom, but it's designed to be a termed delivery, in the sense that if I go into transitional housing, I'm getting counseling or support services, and ultimately want to move these people through transitional housing into permanent housing so they can be on their own. Mm-hmm. But like all things in the governmental sphere, about 10 years ago, transitional housing was a bad word, because what everybody thought of as transitional housing was what we call an SRO, a single room only, okay, which were the hotels that you used to see on the TV series in New York City, where the cops were always knocking on the door and the light was hanging from the cord and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so transitional housing was not very popular. It's come back into vogue as people realize that there are multiple different kinds of transitional housing that range from little portable housing units like the pallet shelters that we have at Homeward Bound for the people with pets, mm-hmm, which are heated and cooled and insulated but have no bathroom or kitchen facilities, to tiny homes. The big difference is transitional housing is individual as opposed to what we call convergent, which is what a shelter is, where people are housed together. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned yourself as Homeward Bound and United Way and various Catholic Outreach, Joseph Center, various others. How many people are partnering, or how many organizations are partnering with you to make this possible?
We have offered through our when the process started, we agreed that we would create a service council, which would be led by Homeward Bound and United Way, but would encompass all of the other nonprofits who potentially wanted to provide services at this location. Mm-hmm. We have talked to a number of people. There are a number of people who've come to the service council and said, I'm supportive of this effort, but I don't have enough. Mona's a good one. Mona mm-hmm. came and said, I'm supportive of this effort, but I don't have enough staff to have anybody down there on any regular schedule. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right now, Mutual Aid Partners is going to be there full time. They've moved their entire operation, which was over at the in the church parking lot there north of the library on Tuesdays, mm-hmm. which is fine in the summer, except that it's hot, and in the winter it's freezing. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, it was actually Tuesday, when they did the last partnership of the year, the last MAP distro, they did it inside. That was the first event we've ever had there. And people seem to be grateful to be out of that 15-degree cold when they're picking up their groceries.
Sure. I'm gonna slow you down just a little bit. So Mutual Aid Partners are going to be there full time, and we've seen the facility. So where will they?
Looks different today than when you saw it, though.
Yeah, yeah. There was nothing in it when we saw it, just floor and walls. So where will they be, and what services do they provide in specifically?
Well, Mutual Aid Partners is one of our partners. Uh-huh. The facility is designed, as you ladies saw when you came through it. It has an office strip across the back of it, right, where there will be 2 offices and a medical examining facility for the clinic from Homeward Bound to come down and do medical examinations. There will also be space for case managers and Mutual Aid Partners. Those are the only people that will actually be operating out of there on day one.
Okay.
Part
and,
of the,
and when is day one?
Day one is tomorrow morning.
Oh, so we are so timely.
Ground floor.
Yeah.
I'm not happy. I'm not terribly happy about that because we still have trenches dug on the sides of the building that won't be filled till midday tomorrow, and I'm concerned about, somebody falling into one of the trenches. But we opened it up for the mutual aid partners distribution on Tuesday. It worked very well. People seem to be grateful. They were unhappy that the restroom trailer wasn't ready yet, but we don't have the plumbing done yet. We're finishing all that this week and next week, hopefully. And I think it will be a work in progress for probably a couple of months because people will come to see if they feel comfortable there. The biggest question we got on Monday was, do I have to sign anything? Do I have to give you personal information? And the answer is no. It's a place for people to be warm, be comfortable, be safe, but there are rules. It is not just come in and do whatever you want. And it provides the capacity that none of the other providers have had to house the majority of those people in the park. Because the issue that the business community has had with the park is largely based on the visible group of people that are always in the park. Now, inside the resource center lot, they will not be able to put their tents up. There will be rules like that, but they can certainly come in, and if they want to lay down on their backpack and nap inside the resource center during the day, they can. But what they're going to learn is that our job at the resource center is to make services available. So somebody's going to come tap them on the shoulder 4 or 5 times during the day and say, is everything okay? Can I get you a cup of water? Would you like to talk to somebody? And what we've found anecdotally is that it takes about 20 interactions with someone who's been on the street before they generally will open up and say, yes, I have an issue. Is there something you could help me with? And that could be as simple as I have I'm frightened because I have 25 desk appearance tickets that are out there, and I'm always afraid when I see a police car they're going to pick me up, to I don't have my medication, to whatever. But it takes, the biggest thing people don't understand about this population is that they're on the streets for a reason. It could be addiction, it could be economic, it could be a number of different things, it could be substance abuse. They're all on the street for a reason, and they've all lost control over their own life and their dignity. And it takes a while to get them to trust people. And if we do what we hope to do right with the resource center, is gain some trust so that we can begin to cut slices of that population away from where they are in the parks and get them into transitional housing and then get them into permanent housing.
So you do have a goal. I understand that this facility will only be available for 2 years. And then there is another piece of that pie coming on board. Can you kind of give us an idea of what that may be? Or is there anything in sight as of yet? There
are a number of things on the table. We have advocated Homeward Bound, particularly for a number of years, for some kind of a community campus that might have safe camping. It might have some tiny home kind of units. It would have an administrative facility, which this pavilion could serve as in the new location, wherever that might be. And ultimately, it would move you on up to permanent housing. But the trick here is that people who enter a facility like that go through steps. You gain their trust back, and they might move out of a tent into a tiny home, from a tiny home into permanent housing over time. But it takes a long time to make that work, and it's an expensive process. But we know that you've all heard the term housing first, which is everybody has the right to housing, and that's certainly true. But it is very difficult to take someone who's been on the street for 7 or 8 years and put them directly from a camp into an apartment and get them to understand what it's like to live inside 4 walls. And some of these people have not lived inside 4 walls for years. Now, one of the difficult things to understand about homelessness/houselessness, and I hate the use of the 2 words, but that may just be Bill. People are homeless. I've had people from the camps say, Bill, I don't have a house to live in, but I have a home because I'm in a camp with my friends. And I certainly understand that. And our ultimate goal as a community has to be to come up with a solution that will allow people in a dignified fashion to move down the track from non-housed to housed, whatever fashion might be their final destination. And transitional is the piece we're missing. Catholic Outreach does a wonderful job with their housing, with their specific permanent housing units. So does we have one of the best regional housing authorities in this part of the country, in the Grand Junction Housing Authority. We have Housing Resources of Western Colorado. We've got a lot of resources doing the permanent end of it, but there are two issues. One is a capacity issue. There are many more people than we have vouchers in space. The second is an economic issue, which is we don't have enough vouchers to help people get subsidized rent. Homeward Bound got into that business in 2015 when we began building the Pathways apartments there on 29 Road. We built those 40 apartments, and we were the first project in Grand Junction that was where the vouchers were project-based, not individual, which meant that we had a voucher for each of the 40 apartments. People came into them when their economic level reached a point that they couldn't qualify for homelessness housing anymore. That voucher stayed with the apartment, but they were then given another voucher to use with another landlord. And part of the strategies that the city of Grand Junction is working so hard on with housing are the strategies to create some programs for landlords so they'll be more willing to take vouchers. I've been in many conversations, as has the people from the Housing Authority and Catholic Outreach and all of the other people that are in this space, where landlords say, why would I take a voucher? Because although I'm getting some guaranteed income, I'm going to have to spend $10,000 to rehab the apartment when the tenants leave. That's true all too often, but that shouldn't preclude people from using vouchers. And the city of Grand Junction has a number of really good strategies through their housing department.
And why do you think that is true? Is it that lack of transitional housing that causes the person to not take care of the place
I think that's
that
part of it. I think.
What do you think? Because if you were a landlord and you thought that and you had experienced that, would you be willing to?
Probably not. And a lot of our rental landlords in this town, and particularly in the affordable end of the spectrum, are individuals who have 3 or 4 properties. And they're looking at their investment in those 3 or 4 properties. And while there's something good about having a guaranteed check every month for most of your rent, there is some risk. And what we have to do is create programs that will help certify the people that are going to go into those houses so that the landlords will feel more comfortable making them do that. This is not just a problem with the people from Whitman Park. That's just the bottom end of the spectrum.
Right.
It's a problem that we've let happen over the past 35 years in this country, and it's now so large that it's difficult to get your hands around.
Well, and I see, and I am a part of the Neighborhood Alert on Facebook, and I see people coming on daily that have lost their home, that have need just a little bit of help, or they need a job. They lost their job for whatever reason, and they need some help on that end. Is your facility going to provide services to help people get jobs?
Or are those services already provided? Do you think?
Well, those services already exist in disparate places. The most difficult thing for most of us to understand is that if you are homeless in this community and do not have a vehicle, it's very difficult for you to access services because you've got to go to different places to get them. From Homeward Bound, if you stayed with us last night, down to the day center at Catholic Outreach to get a shower. From there to have lunch at Catholic Outreach. If you're going to go to your doctor, you've somehow got to get out to St. Mary's or to Marillac. Those are very difficult things to do, and hopefully what our case management staff that we will put at the Resource Center will do is be able to connect people with resources.
So let's talk about the case managers. How many will you have, and what do you anticipate to be the number of people that you will be servicing, and will the case managers be able to keep up? And is that like a 2-year assignment? And what kind of education? Let me keep going.
Let's see. That's 5.
All right. Go ahead. Talk.
We will have one part of a new grant that we got for homelessness outreach services from the State Department of Housing will allow us to fund a full-time full-time case management person. We don't call them case managers at Homeward Bound because the population doesn't like to be managed. So we call them case navigators.
Oh.
Because that's me assisting you to
Right,
get
on
somewhere.
purpose,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
okay.
play that works,
And
but
it's
you'd be
important.
surprised
Right.
how much difference that makes. We'll have one full-time family navigator there, supported by a second case management family navigator from Homeward Bound who will work in and out of there as needs dictate. Plus, we will be working with Mesa County and with other nonprofits who also have case management capabilities to bring their resources in when necessary. So there will be, I guess, we were down there setting up the facility this morning, and I'm thinking that there will be permanent places for the people that are actually going to be staffed there, but there will be 5, 6, maybe 7 other desks available for people to talk to people when they're there.
At any given time, you could call someone in then,
Right.
if necessary.
If not, you could reach out to someone, and there is a system that the federal government uses called HMIS. It's the Homeless Management Information System. You've heard, I know, when you were speaking with Bev a few days ago, that you were talking about the point-in-time count, which is the
Right.
one time a year count that HUD requires us to do to determine the number of people that are on the streets. The point-in-time count serves as the basis for HMIS, or serves as one of the components that goes into HMIS, and it determines the amount of money that the federal government can allocate based on HUD's budget to homelessness. And one of the difficulties with the population that we work with, and I don't blame them one bit, is that if you've got to fill out the same piece of paper 9 different places, it's one, it destroys your dignity, and 2, it's insulting. And so one of the things that we were fortunate enough to do at Homeward Bound about 18 months ago was become the first shelter in Colorado on the Western Slope to be certified to do all our IMS entries electronically. So people don't have to fill out multiple pieces of paper.
That would be a blessing because I wouldn't like it.
No, I certainly wouldn't like it either. And what HMIS does is they dump all their data every 6 months. So you have to be re-entered back into the system. But the new electronic system that they put in place allows you to call up that old data and verify it. The other thing that is remarkable about what we've been allowed to do is that Homeward Bound can ask, is one of the test entities that can ask specific questions to our market. They're standard questions that HMIS asks. And people often say, well, aren't you violating their privacy by asking their name when they come in? And a lot of these people are concerned about giving their details. They may have a warrant out somewhere. They may just not want to be known that they're on the street. HMIS automatically scrambles the name so it's in a number anyway. But Homeward Bound has been given permission to use in this facility what we call an anonymous client, which means if I come in and I need to access services, I can do it so anonymously they can still get me into the service queue and introduced to people without personal identification information.
I can understand that because there are some times when there are people that we know, if you will, that need services that you offer and really don't want to be known.
They don't want to be known.
A reputation, however many other things could split a family. So,
or they don't want, they may be, there are myriad reasons. If I've learned anything in the 12 years I've been with Homeward Bound, it's that the homelessness problem is a lot like an onion. Every layer you peel off, you find another one. You may think you solved that problem, but then there will be another problem underneath it. And every one is different. I think the hardest thing for people to understand, and I go around the community in conjunction with my partner, Zeb Miracle from United Way and their initiative to end homelessness program that we're working on, talking to different groups. And the whole approach is that every one of these people is an individual, just like the three of us.
Right.
Our stories are different. Our reasons for being where we are different. But we tend as a nation to categorize these people as lazy, as people who want to be where they are. And that's just not true. There are some people who have been homeless for so long that it's very difficult for them to break the cycle. But given an alternative choice, nobody wants to live on the street. I mean, when I was growing up in this town, there were people who used to come up from riding the rails and at least living on the river and knock on my parents' back door and say, "Can I mow your lawn for a meal?" The hobos have always been with us. There are people who always want to live off the grid. But the majority of these people, at least 80% of the people I think that are out there, if we can find a way to help them with the problem that got them there, we can potentially get them out of that. And that's the whole key to this resource center, It's not a permanent solution. It's simply a way to, and I hate to use this term, but it's correct, to force people to talk to us about services that they might need. Not force them to take services, because you cannot do that.
Right.
But if you regain people's trust, and the staff that we are putting in there, I met some of them this morning for the first time. We were moving tables around. They're all trained in de-escalation. They're all trained in peer counseling. These are not just wardens, if you will.
Right.
These are people who are trained to assess situations, trained to work with people, trained to pass them to the right resource, whether that be an older woman. We had an older woman in at the MAP thing yesterday that I thought would be a perfect candidate if there were space for something that Mona's doing. The difficulty is all of us are almost at capacity. When I joined the Homeward Bound board, we had the shelter on North Avenue, which had 130 beds. We now have roughly 300 beds, counting Pathways in North Avenue, and we're almost at capacity again.
And then we get the word on the street is that there are more coming. I understand that Governor Polis has asked for emergency funding from the government for homelessness. Us and our state and several other states have joined in on this. And it looks like we are going to have more people coming, and because of our weather and the remoteness, if you will, of our area, they tend to come this way.
Well, we do sit on an interstate, but I would like to disabuse for a moment, if I could, the perception that's publicly out there that people are shipped from the west up I-70 to Grand Junction because we have services. And from the mountain towns down here, all of these rumors get started, and they all have a kernel of truth. We know that. There have been times in the past when Aspen and Vail have bussed people out of their communities when they have an international conference and they don't want people camping on the corner. But that is not a routine thing, and they know that they should call us and see if we have the availability of space. What fascinates me is the rumor that Las Vegas sends people this direction. Because there is one of the most remarkable shelter systems I've ever had the privilege to interact with is in St. George.
That's what you said.
And they have a lot more services than we do. So you'd think they would stop there, and their weather's better too, because they're further south and warmer.
Well, in the winter.
In the winter, in the summer it's not so
it's
good.
hell.
Well, not as
bad as Las Vegas, but
or Mesquite.
right. But the people generally. When Proposition 64 passed, that legalized marijuana in this state, there was a big concern on the part of Homeward Bound. We had just gotten here when that happened, that you might see a doubling of the number of people in the shelters because they all wanted to be in Colorado because marijuana was legal.
Right.
They learned very quickly that marijuana wasn't legal in Mesa County, so they went on to Denver. They are still, even though it is legal in Mesa County now on a recreational basis, it is still... we have not seen an appreciable growth in single male individuals, which was whom we were thinking about, who were here for the weed. That's not happened. There is going to be growth because people will migrate where they think they can be served and be helped. But I am fairly confident after 12 years working with the population that the vast majority of the people that we see in the pit counts and everything else are people that have largely been here for a number of years. They're just invisible to us. If they're down on the river, we don't see them.
Right.
And if we move them off the river, they're visible, and then that creates the perception that we have people being bussed in from everywhere.
Okay.
I mean, we were actually working on a project a year or so ago with the city of Craig, which has a very large substance abuse problem, and we were looking to help Craig establish some kind of shelter system in Craig. It ultimately failed because the population said, one, we don't have a problem, and two, we don't want Grand Junction's help because you'll just bus your homeless to Craig. And I thought to myself, in January, I can just see me trying to get people on a bus to go to Craig.
Right.
Not a chance.
Unless they don't know where Craig is.
Yeah, unless they don't know where Craig is. But
then they might say, oh, Craig.
it's a terribly, terribly difficult problem, and it's a very emotional one, as you ladies know.
Right.
Yes.
You know, people think that so many of these people are there because they want to be. We know they're not. But we don't have all the solutions we need yet. And this resource center is not a solution. It's just a piece that will move us a little farther down the road.
So why do you think that there is that perception of the homeless, and what are some of the arguments that people have expressed to you in opposition of the resource center?
And we've had just ourselves have had 4 different people here with 4 different opinions. And so I'd like to hear your end of it. What do you think?
Yeah, why you think there's opposition? Why you
there is not so much opposition to the idea of a homeless resource center as there is opposition to its location.
Okay.
If you look at it from the business community's perspective, and we have a businessman who's a member of our service council now, which is a new thing, because it's always sort of been the businesses, the city, the nonprofits, 3 separate entities. And we wanted somebody from the surrounding business community to be on this service council to help us work through the data that we need to get and things like that. The difficulty is there is the perception that all of these services are just given to somebody and there are no requirements on the other end. That's one.
Okay. And is that true or not true?
It's true some places. It's not true here.
Okay.
Homeward Bound, for example, we have a program called Purposeful Work. We also have a substance abuse recovery program that we work very closely with the Mesa County Jail and the correction system. We have people released on parole to go into our 6-month residential, 6-month optional, 12-step program. And part of the requirement that they have, and part of the requirement that anybody who wants to stay at our shelter for any great length of time, is that they join our Purposeful Work program. And what Purposeful Work is that allows us to they have to volunteer 20 hours a week to help with the duties around the shelter, but we've also created a number of different work paths that we're working slowly down to create a culinary program where we train people to be cooks, and then we're working with the Horizon Drive Businessmen's Association to potentially find some jobs in fast food for those people. We're talking to CMU, we're talking to Hilltop, we're talking to St. Mary's, we're talking to community about potentially providing kitchen workers for their system.
Which is a good idea.
Which is different than just housing somebody and giving them services.
Right. And purposeful work, that sounds like something, because that takes away from your dignity too, when you're just, it's almost like you're given a scrap.
Yeah. And when you're just given everything, and when you close your eyes and you think of Whitman Park on a Saturday in the summer when there were tents all over, and there were people serving food on this side of the park and serving food on this side of the park, you think, why would I not be there if I just was lazy and wanted to lay around? And that is, unfortunately, is an assumption people make. Most of these people do not want to be where they are, but they don't know how to get their way out of it, and the only way to help them is to provide access to these resources. And this was a way that Homeward Bound and United Way, as partners to lead the process, said, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to set up a council that establishes the rules. There are going to be rules for people. We're going to have people who are in there are going to know that we're not going to make them take counseling, but we're going to continue to make it available to them. And we know from experience, all of us, that the more you make this available and the more they see that they have some choices that might help them, the more likely some of them are to take advantage of those choices. So the question then becomes, if we have a population, we got to go back to that question you asked about how many. We assume we limited the capacity of the resource center at any given time to no more than 250 people, including staff.
Okay.
We know that the size of the building, it could easily hold 4 times that number, but that was never our goal. We believe that on a given day, depending on the weather, depending on everything else, we'll have somewhere between 50 and 150 people who access the center during a day. And our goal is to cut that down by 1 person at a time by getting them access to services, potentially getting them into transitional housing. But it's going to require much more than just this resource center.
Well, I know one of the things that Mona talked about that I thought was just brilliant, and you have a couple of things that you have at yours that I thought were brilliant, is both there in Catholic Outreach, that a lot of times people that are doing like the peer counseling, they can see somebody that's made it out to the other side, and they go, I know what you're going through, and they can empathize and help them move on to the next stage. Do you see your population as being different than Catholic Outreach?
No, it's exactly the same
Same
people.
population.
60% of our staff at Homeward Bound have lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's a change, a vast change from what it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And we specifically look for people that we've helped through the process and out the other side, because they have far more empathy and far more ability to interact with people early if they know that I've walked the same steps you've walked.
Right. Well, and that's biblical too.
Yeah, absolutely, that's biblical.
You've had that trial so that you can give a word to the wise.
And the young man, Christopher Masters, who is our Director of Administration and Operations, is a young man from South Carolina who, had years and years of substance abuse, was on the street in several places, and now he's the Director of Administration for us. And he can look at people with the same eyes he had when he was on the street. We have a board member on Homeward Bound's board that has lived experience. And that's very critical, because you cannot help these people help themselves if you don't truly have somebody who understands what they're going through.
Exactly.
And that's the whole focus of the purposeful work. It's the focus of the trauma-informed approach to things that we all use, whether it's Mona or Catholic Outreach or Homeward Bound or any of the other providers, which is, don't ask me what's wrong with me, ask me what happened to me that put me where I am.
Oh, that's
that's
an
a
interesting
huge
thing.
change.
Yeah, that is a different.
Because when we started to build pathways on 29 Road, that's the reason it doesn't look like a shelter, because it's built with pastel colors, it's trauma-informed, people have access to their own private areas. It's a very different approach. It's not like a convergent shelter. If I were starting again, we started that in 2018. We opened it 2019. We opened it smack in the middle of the pandemic. I wouldn't build it that way again, because while I think it's a remarkable facility, the answer to the problem is not thousands more convergent beds in simple locations.
Right.
Even though at Pathways, our families are potted off with their own little individual units that we can change in size depending on the families. And our purposeful work, people have privacy and everything else. Convergent shelter is not an answer for everybody. There are a lot of the people that are in the parks and on the street who don't use shelter because they're uncomfortable with crowds.
Right.
And we understand that.
They want their space.
They want some space. And so one size doesn't fit all. That's the hard thing for people to learn. There is no one solution that will work for everybody. Taking them directly from the street and putting them in a 1,000 square foot studio apartment is not the solution, because they're just as uncomfortable inside those four walls by themselves as they were in the convergent shelter. And the big cities are throwing a lot of money at it. That's why I think what Mayor Johnson's doing in Denver is kind of remarkable, is that he's trying different things, different places. And that's what you've got to do to have a solution, which is why we hope this will be the catalyst to pushing the city and the business community and the nonprofit community together around the table to say, okay, this starts seeing people tomorrow, the 29th of December, 2023. It's going to be done after the winter of, it'll start 2025, and then we'll go into the spring of 2026, because we're not going to throw people out in January. But it's going to be done in 2 years, and we can't wait till the middle of 2025 to start talking about what the solution is. We have to start talking about it tomorrow.
They have to come to the table now.
So, other than that, because I think one of my problems with it is not with shelter, because some of the things I thought that you did that were amazing is you listened to what they were saying. My things are being stolen, and you're going to have the storage units where they can leave them and know it's safe. I thought that was brilliant, and I thought it was also brilliant that you said, we're going to provide transportation so they're in a shelter at night.
If they want it, we will transport them to Homeward Bound. We have other emergency shelter spaces for the winter with churches and different people. Solidarity Not Charity does an emergency shelter unit that we can use.
And where are they?
Solidarity Not Charity is located at the Center for Independence on Gunnison there, the old church that's there in Gunnison. And they use the gym. That's traditional cots in the gym convergent shelter,
Right.
but it is off the street.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal because people, one of the biggest questions about the resource center is what are the hours? Is it 8 to 8? Well, no, it's not 8 to 8. It's going to be open tomorrow morning at 9. That's our first day. And it's also a holiday weekend, so we don't know what kind of a crowd there will be.
Mm-hmm.
But generally it will be from sometime early in the morning till dusk, because we would not want to keep people at the resource center past dark when they can't get into a shelter if they're not there to register
Oh, I didn't know.
in the evening.
See, we just don't know any of how homelessness, how the shelters work. Well, maybe other people do. I don't.
Well, no, you're absolutely...
I think we're in the majority.
You're in the majority. The majority of people think they can come and go to the shelter anytime, and that's there is always an emergency way to help someone. But all shelters operate fairly in sort of the same way. There's an intake period, which typically is like at between 5 and 5:30 before meals start.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's the winter time and we have the resource center open, we want to make sure that if somebody does want to go to North Avenue, we can get them to North Avenue or to Pathways so they can go through intake.
Mm-hmm. So how will they get there? I know you said that we'll give them transportation.
Well,
will it be the bus?
We have
or
bus
will
passes. Homeward Bound also has a couple of vans we're going to use.
Oh,
we're going to
okay.
see what the capacity is.
Okay.
It's kind of a play-by-ear situation for a little while.
It's interesting because we were laying out we had designed 2 months ago a floor plan for the facility, and we were reconstructing said floor plan this morning down there, thinking, okay, maybe it would be better if we did that here, because you ladies have been in there, so you know how much glass there is in there.
Right, it's cold. I mean, it was still cold.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if your utilities are going to get it warm enough to take off your coat.
Well, no, they will, but the problem is that those units, which are very large, they're 2 on one side and 1 on the other. This one isn't hooked up yet. These 2 are being run by a generator from Hilltop. The difficulty is that those units designed for pavilions of that type are self-contained units, so they pull the air that they're warming from inside the facility
Okay.
and recirculate it. And if the facility has not been heated, we right now are paying roughly $1,000 every 4 days for diesel fuel
Oh.
in order to keep it warm.
And so what will it be?
It'll be
once it goes-
electrical once the
Okay.
cables are buried, and that should be
Okay.
next week, hopefully. And what we have learned is that if you let it cool down, like for example over Christmas, if you let it cool down from Friday, from the time people stopped working there last Thursday afternoon, all the way through Tuesday morning at 6 o'clock when you turn it on, temperature inside is probably 5 or 6 degrees above zero because it's gotten colder and it's stale, and then the machines have to circulate that for 2 or 3 hours before you begin to feel an appreciable difference. Now, what we know going forward, now that we're going to have operations going on in limited fashion starting tomorrow, is that we will leave at least one of the heat units on all the time, even though it's going to cost more money for the generator for this week while we wait for the electrical power. We know that if you can keep the ambient temperature inside the pavilion from going down below 40 degrees, it's not that hard to warm it up above that. It's when it gets down to 10 that it takes a long time to get it up to 40.
Exactly. Exactly.
And when we have the 3, we only have essentially 2 of the 3 operating right now. When we have the third, they each do, I believe it's 150,000 BTUs of heat they can push out each one.
And you said they do both heating and
Heating and cooling. In the summer, you just switch to cooling. These units are used for pavilions all over for special events and things like that. The inauguration. The people that built ours are all heading to Las Vegas next week to put up 1 million square feet of pavilions for the Super Bowl.
Oh my goodness. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, at this time, I think we've about worn out you with our questions, and we're just very happy to have had you here to give an explanation, your explanation of what is actually going on, so the people know how to approach you and how to approach that, and what to look forward to and how to help.
Yeah, and that's always our big thing is when people want to help, or again, I think, maybe getting to know the homeless population more. That's what I said. You don't, because when you don't know somebody, you're not going to go out and reach out to them. But if there are ways that you're looking for people to help at the resource center, because I know that that Bev told us there were 600 volunteers for Catholic outreach, which was amazing to me, because I said, how do you recruit somebody to do that? And she goes, they volunteer. And I'm like, wow, that's really impressive.
Nobody says no to Sister Karen. Not me, not anybody.
Nobody says no to her?
No, never.
She doesn't know
I
what
need
that
her
means.
secret.
Yeah, everybody says no to me.
Sister Karen worked with me on a group that was part of Governor Hickenlooper's Pathways Home Project to bring our Pathways apartments and that shelter to a funding readiness status so we could go talk to nonprofits. And we spent a considerable amount of time together. She's a remarkable woman, and Catholic Outreach has done remarkable things in this community. And people need to understand that we are not in competition with them. We are not duplicating their services. We're providing the capacity that their day shelter does not have. Mm-hmm. And Jody, who runs their day center, does a remarkable job. She knows everybody that she works with, and that's one of the best things you can do. The staff that we've hired are going to be trained in exactly that same format, so that they're not talking to just someone who's in the door. They're talking to Bill or Fred or Mary or whomever. Right.
So what sort of training do people go through that help you? Where do they get that training? And
well, our if someone comes on board as what we call a GRC at Homeward Bound, and terminology is important. We call them guest relations coordinators because to us, the population, the people that we serve, be it in the family shelter, be it in any of the employment programs, the rehab programs, or just the general overnight shelter population on North Avenue, they're guests. And we want our people to treat them like they're guests in their home. So you don't want them to feel overly burdened by supervision. You want people to understand the importance of de-escalation. People can remember that when the old Homeward Bound, you'd see a line of people in the parking lot at North Avenue with their bags being gone through and their prescriptions being taken. When we went to low barrier at Homeward Bound, the number of incidents, which means you don't do that anymore, you leave it up to them to police themselves, the number of incidents we had in the shelter dropped appreciably because they want to take control of their destiny. And they know that if I'm causing trouble in the shelter, that to protect themselves, they should let somebody know that. So we began a whole new approach to how we hired people, and we put them through de-escalation training and recognition training that comes from Mind Springs and other providers. A lot of our GRCs have gone through peer counseling training, so they're able to peer counsel. And I think one of the most important things we've done is create a system where we're taking people with lived experience and moving them into those positions because it's far easier for them to empathize with the people than it is for somebody like myself who's never experienced homelessness.
Right. Or drug addiction or any of those other alcoholism. One last thing that, this was the other thing that kind of irritated me is that, I don't mind when groups do things like the city. When Scott told us, we just paid for the facility, but we're not paying for any of the ongoing things for the peer counseling. And when we talked to you, you said, we couldn't afford to do that. There's no way we could do that without. And I think people feel like, well, why do you have to be sneaky about it? Just say, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it, and why we think it's a great idea. And this is where that money's coming from.
It's interesting you should bring that up because after you ladies met me that day and we talked about that, I went back because I remembered those conversations. Initially, the city said, we will provide the capital, not out of the city's operating budget, but out of the remaining funds from the American Rescue Plan allocation that came to the city. But we can't do the operating funds. And we said to the city, then we can't do it because neither Homeward Bound or United Way has the wherewithal to go get that money. And if you want this to work and you want it to happen quickly, we need that help. And the city then said, we have some responsibilities to this. And so the council agreed unanimously that as long as there was a memorandum of agreement between Homeward Bound and the city, because Homeward Bound is actually the signed lessor on the property, and the signed person who manages the facility. As long as we had an agreement that we all agreed on in terms and what our responsibilities were, that they would agree to do that, knowing that this is a commitment they've made for 2 years, and that gives them some financial incentive to stay at the table as well, because they don't want to continue to fund this in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. The other confusion that some people have is that they think those assets belong to the city. The pavilion, the restroom trailer, all those other things. Mm-hmm. Originally, and as the discussions progressed, we thought that might be the case. Mm-hmm. The city said no, we would rather give those to Homeward Bound as part of the funding. Okay. You pay for them; they're your assets. Then at the end of the 2 years, the city is not going to be in control of where they go. They will be at the table with us as we figure out the solution, as will the business community. The Downtown Development Association and the Chamber have all agreed that they want to sit at the table because they agree that downtown Grand Junction is not where the ultimate solution for this problem is. Mm-hmm. The population is there because they've always been there, and it's up to us to come up with a better place to provide these services. Mm-hmm. 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 And we have 2 years to do it, which means that effective tomorrow, we're starting the countdown.
Working on that next plan.
2 years comes due, right?
2 years comes due really fast.
Really fast. And then I also heard that they were planning on closing Emerson Park, too.
Emerson Park has always been on the list to be turned into a skate park.
Okay.
That's 3 or 4 years in the planning because they had to go get grant funding for it. And a large portion of the park area at Emerson will be turned into a skate park for that neighborhood. And a large part of Whitman on the west side there, because Whitman is a lovely old park, but it has no parking. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be reconfigured, I believe, over time. To have some parking inside the park and some more things down there as well, to turn it back into a park.
Where you could use it.
Where people can use it. And anybody should be allowed to use the parks. That's,
Well, I think the people that are staying at the park now, if they have a place that they know they can go to get the services they need, whether it be food, whether it be places to rest, medication, however, they would be happy to move out of central downtown in order to get that service. I think time
will tell, but I believe that's to be true. We know there's some great evidence anecdotally that that's true in other small cities. Right. Mm-hmm. The point I keep hammering to everybody is that we have an opportunity now, because we're a small city with what we consider to be a huge problem, but it's very small in numbers compared to bigger cities. Right. Right. And we have an opportunity to do something about it and to create a system that helps people through it and out. Right. 5 years from now, 2 years from now, we may not have that opportunity if we don't do anything about it.
And the other thing I thought was really neat that you were doing is you said you'll have the food on 7 days a week, so they don't have to worry about weekends.
Well, actually, we will.
Is that not true?
No. What we actually have done is, and we met last week with 16 different ministries who were going down to Whitman Park, and the majority of them were providing food perhaps one day during the week. Some of them would do it, but the majority of them were doing it on Saturday and Sunday when there's no available anywhere else. And without exception, even Pastor Pinky, who is one of our more effusive personality pastors in the city, said, I like the idea of doing it on a schedule where I'm not serving on this side of the park and somebody else is not serving on that side of the park.
I think that's such a good idea.
And they're going to have a place to come in and prepare, get their stuff set up, come out and feed it to the people. When the weather's good, they can go outside and sit on the outside tables, but it'll all be policed up and there won't be trash around the parks like there were at the end of the day. There's nothing more frustrating. My own church took stuff down to Whitman Park once a month, and there was nothing more frustrating than seeing somebody take a bag, go through it and see if they like everything, and then just pitch the rest of it onto the grass. That's not going to happen at the resource center. And the people that are coming there, we know that it's going to be a period of trial and error as we figure out how it works. But I think everybody's hearts are in the right place, and although we snip and scrap with each other a little bit sometimes as nonprofits, we all do so from the same area of passion and care. And
we all think we have the best idea.
If we can make this better by creating a capacity unit that will enable us to do this and do it in such a fashion that unit can be picked up and placed somewhere else to be part of the ultimate solution, then it's a win-win for both the nonprofits and for the city of Grand Junction.
Well,
It
we
is
are.
indeed.
We're praying that this is really successful and that we see things, and we appreciate you coming back and telling us how it's going in, say, 6 months.
I would like to do that, and I would invite you ladies and anybody who sees this, if they have, it is a public facility. If you want to come down and take a tour and see what we're doing and how it works, please do so. We welcome that. This is not a secret. It's not it's not done out of the public transparency sphere. We want it to be transparent because we're trying really hard to give these people an opportunity that at present they just don't have because of capacity.
And we appreciate you letting us know that, too.
Yes. Thank
So-
you very much, Bill.
Thank you.
You've
Appreciate
been
you.
watching Mesa County Compass. These are the facts as we see them, the truth as we know it. You decide.